Hello, I'm Shane in Sweden, and in this video we're going to look at how you can secure files with encryption and signing so that you can safely send them or transmit them through some transport mechanism like FTP or email, or just copying the files through a USB stick in a secure and safe manner. Now the scenario we have here, for example, is we have Alice and she's got a friend Bob, and Alice has some photos she's taken, perhaps a selfie, and she wants to send that picture to Bob, which is great, except that Alice is concerned that when she's sending these images to Bob, that in some way somebody else might be able to listen in or see that information that she's sending. So she wants to make sure that it's not possible for somebody else, like Chuck here, to listen in and see those selfie pictures Alice is sending to Bob. She also wants to make sure that only Bob can receive and actually look at the pictures. And Bob also wants to make sure that he can be certain that the images he's looking at, the selfie pictures he's looking at, actually came from Alice and not from somebody else. So we're going to look at how you can do that. Now, obviously, this type of scenario has a number of use cases in the security world. For example, if you've got an incident which is sensitive in nature, for example, a data breach, or the incident you need to be actually sending information which is in itself sensitive information, perhaps from a GDPR perspective, and you want to send that information or that incident description to somebody else in the company, but you're not sure that your mail system is secure, or perhaps the support system where you're loading up that description is open to many users, perhaps some of them don't have the correct rights to see that information, then this type of encryption and signing scenario would be also applicable. Another alternative situation is where you've got a company that's sending information to another company that's sensitive in nature for business reasons, or perhaps it contains personal data. And it's a one-off, so you don't really want to set up certificates and secure FTP or FTPS connections. You just want a quick and cheap and cheerful method to transfer data, possibly even through something like a USB stick. And a third situation is, of course, you have one of your company employees who's offsite somewhere and they have no way of setting up a secure connection to the company intranet, and you need to send them information, which again, perhaps contains business sensitive information. So we're going to look at, in all these situations, how you can protect your data and sign it so that it's encrypted and protected, it's not easily readable, and also that you can guarantee who the sender and receivers are. And the software we're going to use in our example here is GPG, or the GNU Privacy Guard, which is freeware that we can download. So if we go to the homepage for the project and we choose the download page. Now at the start here you've got the source code if you want to compile and build it yourself, but we're going to go for the ready-made products. We're going to go for the binaries here, the binary releases, and we're going to choose the Windows version of GPG. And we can start that download going. And now it's asking for a PayPal. I've already paid for this, so I'm just going to, in this case, I'm just going to choose the 0. Carry on downloading. Now, it's important when you're downloading software from the net that you're going to use for security that you check the integrity of your systems. Now, luckily, they even give you a link here on how to check the integrity of the distribution that you're downloading. So let's just check that out. And you can see here that in Microsoft's case, you can actually look at, when you're installing it, it'll actually show you the integrity information of the package, or you can look at it in the file properties. I would suggest that it's better to look at the file properties rather than waiting until the program's actually running before you're checking the integrity information. So we can look at the properties by right-clicking on this file. And we're interested in the digital signatures in our file properties. If we go and select the digital signatures tab, and we're interested, there's one signature from Innovations GmbH. Now we need to look at the details of our certificate. And if we go down and look at the thumbprint, we can compare that with the information from the website to check that the file is kosher. And these are the two figures we need to check, so they're the same. And in this case, it looks good. So with confidence in our software, we can then go ahead and install it. Okay, so now that we know the executable hasn't been tampered with, we can run it. I'm running it here as an administrator to get full rights. And any software that you're running as administrator, this is why it's important to check that the file you're downloading, that you have some confidence in the source of the file you're running. And we can install it in English, that's fine. And now we get to choose modules. The OL module is for Outlook, and the EX module is the one we're going to use here, which is for Explorer. And it's also good to have the Cleopatra, the certificate manager. So make sure we got the right modules installed. And we set our installation catalog, and then we're ready to roll. And we get an explanation during the installation of the different modules and what they're useful for. But it's the EX we're going to use here, this module in this example. Okay, and we let that install go ahead and finish. And when it's reached 100%, then we can go to the next. And we'll reboot later. Okay, now Alice needs to create some certificates here. So we're going to go into the catalog, the GPG catalog, and start the Cleopatra client, which will immediately start reading our certificate store. And Alice doesn't have any certificates at the moment. So we can create a new key pair here. And we have to give Alice's name. So we'll say Alice Robert. And her email address, which is perhaps alicerobert@hotmail.com. And there we've created that. And it's now going to create a key pair. And now we have to give a phrase. So we can use this very simple key code phrase here. For example, my name is Alice. I would not recommend this as a method in real life, but for this test, it's okay. My name is Alice. And we have to repeat that. My name is Alice. And it's complaining because we don't have a number in our password, but that's okay. We'll carry on. We'll carry on with creating the pair. And we're done. So we just finish. Now we want to be able to send this information, export our public key to Bob. So we go to our export function, and Alice is going to export her public key. This public key will be a file, which she can just rename it to Alice, so it's easier to see who the key belongs to. With this public key, she can then, when she meets Bob, she can give him the public key, and he can use that information to decrypt messages or files that Alice has encrypted with her private key. And of course, if we go to Bob's computer, Bob he has to also create his key pair, so his public key and his private key, and his name will be Bob Cleveland. And his email address would be bobcleveland@hotmail.com. So Bob's going to create also a public key and a private key. And in the fine traditions of this video, he will be using the catchphrase, my name is Bob. And we do that one more time. And he's got a complaint about the digits, but we don't care. And we're going to create the public and private key pair. So now we've got the keys, both Alice and Bob have public and private keys, and they can swap their public keys with each other to set up an encrypted channel. Okay, so now Alice is going to send her photographs. Here we've got a mysecretdocument.txt. This is Alice's picture, and using the GPG-X, all she has to do is go to sign and encrypt, and she can choose her signature here, which is Alice's, her key, private key, and she can encrypt it for herself and even Bob. So now the file is encrypted for Bob. Now in the scenario where you don't want to swap public keys and stuff, you can actually have an option here to create a password, and anybody with a password can decrypt the file. This is for, say, business to business one-time transfers. But here we're going to use the keys really. So we have to give the password, the one-time password here. So it just doesn't really matter. We're not going to be using this. Just wanted to show the feature. So we just create a little my password. Or my name is not Alice. And we have to give that again. Now to encrypt the file, Alice has to prove that it's actually her encrypting the file here. So it'll ask here for Alice's key phrase for her private key. So she's going to use my name is Alice. And you can see that it says here on the screen, Alice Robert there, the identity. So we create the encrypted file, and you can see we've got a GPG file there, which is encrypted and which can be sent to Bob. Now, Bob wants to receive Alice's file, so he has to import her public key. So he gets that public key file from Alice and he imports it into his key store using Cleopatra. And so now he can decrypt files that Alice encrypts with her private key. Now Alice wants to send her encrypted selfie to Bob, and there are several scenarios here. Either she can encrypt it with her private key, in which case Bob can decrypt it with the public key that he's received and import it into his key store. Or in the case where she has Bob's public key, she can encrypt the file for Bob using Bob's public key, and Bob can then decrypt the file using his private key. So Alice sends the file to Bob, and then Bob will open it up using these public and private keys. So Bob receives Alice's encrypted selfie, perhaps as an email attachment, and he downloads the file to his computer and he opens it up. And now he can encrypt it. Now, because she encrypted it for Bob using his key, his public key, it's actually asking here for the private key for Bob's identity. So that would be, of course, my name is Bob, as we saw earlier. And using his private key phrase, Bob was able to then decrypt the file. And we can see that the file actually has a valid signature, and we can actually identify it and verify that this file actually came from Alice Robert. So we've fulfilled all the requirements we had. The file is protected in transport. And even if someone did manage to get a copy of the file, they wouldn't be able to decrypt it because they don't have the private key for Bob. We also saw that we can identify the sender of the file. We can verify that the selfie image that's sent actually comes from a specific person, in this case, Alice. Okay, this was just a quick demonstration, but when we're using public and private keys and encryption in real life, we should be careful about how we actually use these systems. If we don't use them in the correct way, then they will not be particularly effective. So we should look at some of the best practices when we're using pretty good privacy, or even this implementation of it, Gnu Privacy Guard. One good practice is to set an expiration date on our certificates. Perhaps like a year or at maximum 2 years. We can do this using our Cleopatra client. So if we open up our Cleopatra client and go to our certificate and check the details, here you can see we can set an expiry date. So we go for, we would like it to expire in years, and we'll set it for 1 year. Click on OK. Now we have to prove our identity before we change the information. So of course we have to give our private passkey in this case. So, my name is Alice again. And once we've done that, we'll be able to change the expiration date. So this is one of the good practices we should be doing. It would also be useful if we can set a calendar reminder in Outlook or other calendar function we use for that date 1 year in advance ahead of us, so that we know when we have to actually renew our certificates and we don't miss that. Otherwise, the whole system will suddenly stop working. A third good thing to do, good practice, is to generate a revocation certificate. So what is a revocation certificate? Well, if your certificate's been compromised in some way, for example, an unknown person has gained access to your passphrase, then you might want to send out a declaration that your certificates can no longer be trusted. An approvable way to identify that this is actually you and that the certificate really is not to be trusted anymore is to use a revocation certificate. And we can generate these inside of the Cleopatra client. And we just have to go to our certificate. In this case, it's Alice's certificate again inside the Cleopatra client. And we can generate our revocation certificate. And we just save that to our computer. And we'll just change the name to Alice Robert. Right. So if Alice's certificates are compromised, she can send that certificate, revocation certificate, to Bob, and Bob can edit it. As you can see here, he can import it, and that will nullify the certificates that are being compromised. Okay. Another good point is to use a separate primary key for each identity. So here we have Alice. She's using this for public communication or communication with her friends. Alice may be sending communication inside her job role, or she may be doing it as a public blogger, and so she might want separate identities. You can also consider using different subkeys for different uses. So we've been using our keys for signing and encryption and everything else. You may want to separate your uses and have different subkeys for those. And also, take care of your primary key. Make sure it's sufficiently large that it's not easily broken. In our case, I think if we go into the details of the keys we were making, they're not particularly good in this case. They're only 2048 bits, so we really should have made them a bit stronger. One final thing you might want to consider is, since your primary key is so important, keep it offline. Keep it away from the computer in a safe storage somewhere. You also have the potential of using smart cards, which contain your primary key, which you only just plug into your computer when they're actually needed. I've included some links below the video here, which contain a guide to some tips for better key handling and certificate handling. So I guess that's all for this video. Download the tool, try it out, and I hope you have fun with it. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video. And until then, it's good night from me and from Alice and from Bob. Thank you very much.